so if we can, call to order this meeting. It's a work session for the Huron City Council, Wednesday, July 29th. Roll call, please.
Crawford. Here. Klaus.
Here.
Pat.
Here.
Martino.
Here.
Dyke.
Here.
Hardy.
Here.
Peggy.
Here. Okay, tonight what we have on the agenda is we're going to discuss and have a presentation about the USGS operation coming into possibly coming into the Carnaga site. And that was, there's an option for that to be in conjunction with the Huron Joint Port Authority. So we'll have a discussion, and I think we have with us, I'll let Joe introduce.
Mr. Mayor, we have Ms. Teresa Snyder with the Abbey Group and the Huron Joint Port Authority engaged in this group to help navigate through all of this, and she wants to come and, number one, update us, number two, tell us the path moving forward, and answer any questions that the council may have, because this needs the support of the city as well.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do tonight is discuss a couple of options. Obviously, we will be taking a look at this moving forward with the staff, whether it be in conjunction with the Huron Joint Port Authority, or whether we would look at bringing in an outside developer. So that will be part of this session afterwards. I guess, if you're ready.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm Teresa Snyder. I do strategic growth and development for the EV Management Group. We got connected to the City of Huron through one of our contractors because we do energy construction and management is our primary function. We got connected into the City of Huron and into the Port Authority because of that contractor. And then when they discovered my background, I joined the EV Group about a year ago. Prior to that, I was with the Toledo Lucas County Port Authority for 8 years, and I headed up their energy and finance programs. Prior to that, was with KeyBank for 20 years, and I have 30-plus years of community development type lending and urban planning. And so they saw that as a niche where maybe we could add some value to the conversation between our resources and connections and then my direct experience. When we were brought in with the specific goals for our engagement. The first understanding was that this community was trying to build the financial capacity of the Huron Port Authority so that they could become a more viable contributing factor as it relates to economic development. That was premise number one. Premise number two was that they brought us in for was to identify some alternative resources of funding that could help with the financing for the USGS site. We also looked at possibly identifying some grant opportunities, and then we were really going to serve as an interface between the funders, the USGS, and then the other stakeholders, because we have connections in all of those arenas. And then the ultimate goal was to create a path forward, or recommendations for a path forward for you guys to consider. So that was the initial premise that we're working under. We've been meeting and connecting with the Port Authority core team bi-weekly. So we've been working through this process for about 2.5 months. I'll just go through some key action items to date, and then I'll get down to where we have some recommendations. So John Hogue is a local developer who has been involved in this original process as the program has been laid out. We met with John to review the construction budget that he had proposed based on his experience. He in no way has been selected. There's not been any selection, but he has experience in this arena with the USGS. He's a local contractor, and so he's been providing some technical support. So he provided a construction budget and also talked to us about what the requirements are for the USGS. We reviewed that proposed budget. We met with the USGS to discuss what their process is for awarding the contract for their building. We also were working under the premise that this community wanted the USGS building there. That was the other premise that we've been sort of building off of. We have built a financing prospectus, which is just basically In the financial world, it's a summary of what the project is for financiers. And so it gives a comprehensive look, and that's a document that we'll be delivering to the Port Authority next week when we present to their board. We have also engaged multiple conversations with funding sources, both private equity and the State Infrastructure Bank. We have relationships with both. I directly contacted the State Infrastructure Bank to confirm if the project, number one, qualified, and to confirm that there were funds available for a project like this. Okay. We also went to the private equity market to see if there was an interest for funders to do this privately. We have reviewed and identified a couple of grant opportunities. We also did a little bit of research for the port as far as the benefits of a TIF for the future development of that site. And then we've been building a mapping process forward that we're going to present next week. So, talk a little bit about the USGS program project award. What we found out is that they're still interested. This has been an ongoing conversation with them. I think as everybody is aware, they are still interested in the ConAgra location. The award is still open, so it hasn't been closed or it hasn't been taken off the record. It's still available. Huron, however, is competing with several other communities with ports. I believe it's Toledo and maybe Vermilion would be the two other ports that are fighting for this opportunity to host the USGS building. A couple of things we discovered with the USGS is, number one, they will not extend their award until the site has the infrastructure there. So the infrastructure has to be in place before they're going to allocate an award. Down that path, I know the city is working on putting together the engineering for that. That is in process, and that's a project that's in the works. But I know also there's another path to look at the existing infrastructure that's on that site to see if it's sufficient for the USGS. And if that's sufficient, then maybe we can move forward with that prior to the rest of the infrastructure. So those are the two paths that are going on right now as it relates to the infrastructure. We talked to the USGS about their requirements as far as a competitive bidding. What does that look like? Because of the size of this building is like 50,000 square feet or less. If it's 50,000 square feet or less, there's no requirement for competitive bidding. However, based on the feedback that we've heard from this community, it would definitely go to an open bid process. We would recommend that, and that's part of our recommendation. Saying that, one of the key requirements of the USGS is that anybody that bids on the project has to have previously completed a similar federal project. So it's not an open, flat, everybody can come and apply. You have to have completed a project similar to this as the benchmark that they put out there. So even if you're putting out an open RFQ, that's a preliminary delineation that not a lot of companies are going to be able to compete.
Are there any local?
John Hody.
Okay.
John Hody, when we mentioned that we had had conversations, when I was speaking with the USGS, I mentioned that we were working with John Hody on the budget and laying out some preliminary numbers. The representative from the USGS was very familiar with John and his work and basically said he is highly qualified for this type of a project and that they would not have any hesitancy in working with him. So that's what we know about the USGS and the grant department and the award department. So the financing options that we looked at. So really, there's two financing options that come up that are really the best tracks for this project. The first one is the State Infrastructure Bank. The State Infrastructure Bank is a thing that the municipality and the administration are probably very familiar with, but it offers 3% money. The first year, there is no interest and no payments. The second year is interest only, and then beyond that, your payments are semi-annual. Okay? The project, based on what I shared with the SIB, technically qualifies. The premise, what we've talked about for the USGS site, qualifies. There are funds currently available, so those two things were good.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You said that it technically qualifies. Is there a hesitation that there's something about it that might throw it out?
Well, typically, when you think of the State Infrastructure Bank, they are typically funding roads, bridges, interchanges, those kind of things.
Okay.
And so I was not 100% confident that they were going to be excited about a building. because we're looking to fund the building
Right.
out of their fundings. And when I shared with them the scope and the vision for the project, they said absolutely there is a carve out within their guidelines that is for economic development. And this is a key economic development project for this community, and therefore it technically meets the threshold requirements, okay? Within their process, they do allow for an entity like the Port Authority to act as the borrower. However, your Port Authority doesn't have the financial capacity to stand alone at this point. The objective, as I understand, is to get them to a place where they are rated and they do have that capacity. But right now, they don't have that capacity. So in that scenario, the Port Authority, if they act as the borrower, will need a guarantor. And it will need to be a public entity that guarantees that. Based on, yes, sir.
Does that have to be limited to one guarantor?
Technically, it does not have to be limited to one guarantor, but it has to be a public entity that has public resources. The challenge is that until you do the initial project application to the State Infrastructure Bank, and they understand the project and the players, you don't get the delineation of what the guarantee requirements are going to be. And so it's like this cart before the horse situation where, I can't tell you distinctively you need to pledge this or that or this, and it won't be determined until you actually submit initial application, which comes further down in the recommendations. Based on the projections, one of the things that we did confirm with the USGS was the projections that John Hody wrote into the budget for the revenues were spot on with what they could qualify for. They have a cap where they cannot pay more than $250,000 a year in rent. And so that was one of the questions that the administration had asked me was, great that John came up with these numbers, but could we validate that with the USGS? And they definitely validated that the numbers that John had projected were within reason for this type of development and this type of project. Okay. Based on the results of that, with the budget that he proposed, it comes out to about a $50,000 to $55,000 a year profit that could be used to funnel and fund the development of your Port Authority. That's the net profit that this project generates. And so the concept would be, based on those numbers, that's kind of where the revenue would fall out. And that could serve as a resource to help fund the development of your Port Authority. The second option is a private equity option. If you choose not to go down the path of the State Infrastructure Bank, we have access and we have interest from private equity to fund this project. The problem with that is when you have a public entity like a Port Authority who does a project that leases and has revenue coming in on the project, that project does not qualify for tax-exempt financing. Therefore, the interest rate would be between 5.75 and 6.25%, which eats up all the profitability. So in scenario 2 with private equity, the project is done, but the Port Authority doesn't get any significant revenue to help build up its capacity. All it gets is the on their resume that they did a project, which is good, but the idea is to create revenue and to create capacity. The guarantor requirements, as I mentioned, until an application is submitted to the SIB, we're not going to have delineation. We actually talked with the underwriter, which is Michael DeFerna. He does all the underwriting for the SIB, and spoke to him directly, and he said, I just can't give you specific requirements until you give me an application where I know what we're talking about. However, in this scenario, what we would envision is that the rental income would serve as the first source of repayment. Clearly, it has about 1.35 debt service coverage projection, which is strong in anybody's book. If you got 1.35 debt service coverage on a loan, that's really good. So that would be the first source of repayment. The USGS is willing to do a 10-year lease with another 10-year option. So it's a 20-year fix with a 10-year lock, okay? The likelihood that they leave after 10 years is probably not going to happen. So you actually have a very strong cash flow potential for the whole life of the loan. that more than covers, 1.35 times covers what that debt service is, okay? The city, ultimately, if the city becomes the guarantor, then they're going to have to identify what are the sources of revenue that would serve as that secondary source of the guarantee, okay? That would come from the recommendation from underwriting, and then you guys as the city administration would determine what resources could you allocate towards that. Another possibility is that the Huron Port Authority could take a portion of the profitability that they're going to get and put it into a reserve fund. This is the way the Toledo Port manages their bond fund, is they have a 10% reserve. And that reserve fund sits out there as a default prevention. So in a worst case scenario, if the USGF didn't pay for whatever reason, the first line of default could be to the profitability in that reserve before it even came to the city for a guarantee. I mean, those are just the kind of thoughts that we're having on how this could possibly be structured. This is the first I've voiced that, so the Port Authority doesn't know that that's a recommendation. But it's just, you know, let's really look outside the box and figure out how we can get everybody comfortable that this is really a community project and that everybody's got skin in the game, okay? Under that model, I'd recommend that you have at least 1 year debt service coverage in that reserve, and that would take a couple years to get there, but that would be my recommendation on that. So that's kind of what we've gone through in the last 2 months. We've been driving through all those conversations and putting these pieces together, and we have some recommendations out of that. The first recommendation is that you urgently pursue the development of the infrastructure for the USGS. I know the city's on that, I know you're working on it, but that's obviously a critical component to making this development happen. When we came into the picture, we looked at that site and what the city and the port were talking about, and from my experience, it is like, checks all the boxes. This is the best kind of development to have when you're in a city. I mean, everything that lines up on that site, to have an anchor tenant like the USGS there, to have the waterfront that you have, it's marketable, it has all the bells and whistles of a great urban development, and got us really excited. So the second recommendation would be complete the initial SIB project application with the Huron Joint Port being the borrower and the city coming in as the guarantor. We recommend this based on the premise that you're trying to build up the quality of the Port Authority. I mean, if that's not the overall mission, then you don't need the Port Authority to come in and be the borrower. But if that is still the mission, then this is the structure we would recommend. This allows, the preliminary application doesn't obligate anybody to anything. What it does is it allows the SIB to take it to committee to see if it would meet the, you know, the thumb-on test, and then send it to underwriting. And that's where you would get, here's what the requirements are going to be. If you want to move forward, you need to do A, B, C, and D. But until you do that initial application, that doesn't happen. It'll result in a clear delineation of what the financial commitment would be and what the requirements are. It'll also clarify the fundability of this proposed project. Is this just a fantasy that we're all talking about? Or is there really capital to make it happen? And then how do we move there? And then, like I mentioned, applying doesn't obligate anybody to anything. You're just trying to find out, is this a qualified project and can we put the pieces together to make it work? Okay. Ultimately, if you go in with the port being the borrower and the city being the guarantor, and it doesn't work, you can always go back and have the city be the borrower, you know, and just run the project yourself. I heard you mention that you were considering bringing in a developer to do this. I can't support that recommendation based on the premise that you're trying to build a Port Authority. I don't know why, with a project like this, you would take that potential revenue and of $55,000 a year for the next 20 years and outsource that to a private developer. So I don't know if that's what I heard, but if that's not what you were indicating, just know that my inclination would be try to keep as much of that revenue in this community and in your coffers to build your capacity. Recommendation number 3 is tied into the infrastructure, just getting all those pieces together. Recommendation number 4 would be work with the USGS to prepare a request for proposal. Get that ready now, so that when you're ready to actually pull the trigger, you can. I'd also recommend that you formalize the partnership. If there's going to be a partnership on this site and this development with the Port Authority, I'd recommend that you formalize it. I mean, just move forward and get that formalized so that the rest of the pieces can come together. I don't have a dog in this fight. I guess I should probably clarify that. We're kind of a third party that they've contracted with us, but we're really trying to speak holistically for the best interest of the Huron community. Okay, I just felt like I needed to say that for some reason. And then our final recommendation, I guess we would have a dog in the fight at this point, but we would recommend that you contract with us to continue to drive the process and get the project across the finish line, completing the application to the SIB, getting the financing pieces in line, and helping to facilitate how that partnership works together. We'd love to be a part of that in some way, in some capacity. If not, that's fine, but that would be one of our recommendations too. That's everything I had to pitch and share with you. Are there any specific questions? I kind of ran through this stuff. Yes, sir.
So, it sounds like you were saying it's a 20-year term. That's what you're envisioning?
It can be up to 25 years under the SIB. But I would recommend, I imagine underwriting will come back and match the term with the lease agreement. That would probably be what they would do.
And then just one other question. This came up at our last working session. Sorry. It's my understanding that 50% of the joint Port Authority wants nothing to do with this. Working with the team, do you know why?
I have not heard any resistance in any conversation that I've had with the Port Authority. I've been on the phone with the team for more than every other week.
So the township would be willing to join in backing that note?
With the township, I can't commit to that. And I don't know that they would or they wouldn't.
I heard that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We have not presented to the township, and we have not given them the option or what that might look like. And so it would be premature and really in error for me to speak about what they would or wouldn't do. And I don't know that they have even been given any information to consider it. So we've not had a conversation like this where they would even understand what that would look like.
Don't they have somebody on the joint Port Authority? Don't they have a person on the...
They have representation on the Port Authority, but I haven't heard, we haven't definitively pitched what that guaranteed potential might be. I did ask, and early in the phases, are there other partners that could be a part of this? And I am aware that, the trustees is one opportunity that we could possibly look at. I don't know, though, also what their rating is, if they're a rated entity, and if they even really have even if they have a bank account, I don't know that they have what credit underwriting would consider to be a qualified guarantor. I don't know. And until we get into underwriting, we wouldn't know that. Yes, sir?
Can you give a little more detail? You mentioned a $55,000 annualized profit over the 20-year period. Can you explain a little more detail how that works?
Yeah, so there is a base rental income that the USGS would pay, and then when you net out all of the management costs, the facility costs, all of the operational costs of owning and operating that building, the net profit is somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $55,000 a year, based on the base rent that they're willing to pay.
Including the two annual payment or the biannual?
That's the net after debt service. That's why I'm saying this is a very lucrative contract, which is why I would encourage you to try to keep it within the arms of your local community.
The 1.35 profit ratio, or whatever that you said, doesn't include any land acquisition costs. That would be the city.
Yeah, no, it doesn't include any land acquisition costs.
And that's over the 20-year term or the 10-year term, the first 10-year term?
It's over the entire 20. The debt service coverage is...
The 1.35 ratio.
Yeah, that's over the entire, because when you take the net profit and you look at how much revenue that we're projecting based on the debt load, it's a 1.35. It's a pretty consistent revenue and cost structure across, and so there's really not a lot of variance in it. And it's over the entire life of the debt is what we projected. Joe, did you have something?
I just wanted to add to Mr. Hagee's comment regarding the Port Authority. It is made up of the township, half of it, half of the city, and there's other members, community members. And Gordon Hahn did mention in other meetings that they were not in a position to be a guarantor at this time because of their recent purchase and then everything.
I wasn't part of that meeting, so yeah. Thank you, Joe, appreciate you clarifying that. Yes, sir.
Okay, question for Doug. What's the probability of the current infrastructure that's there? What's the likelihood that that supports the project?
Russ, do you want to take this one?
What's there now?
Russ is gonna work
I
on
know
that.
we've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years.
The existing infrastructure that's there, it can be modified to service the USGS proposal.
What does that mean?
What does that
Can you
mean?
provide a little more detail?
I'm sorry?
Can you provide a little more detail? I
Oh,
don't know
we
what
have
that
to-
means exactly.
Yeah, we've got to tap into existing water main that's there, have that, got to have it cambered and so forth. There's existing sewer. We would have to add another grinder pump. There's existing grinder pump out there. We would tie in to that. So as far as the infrastructure to service the USGS facility, what's there can be modified through some design changes, modifications, as well as there's still easements, of course.
And that's certainly a faster option than doing the $750,000 to $1 million
Well,
new.
unfortunately, no, only because we're still going through, you still have to go through a process of acquiring the easements for that. And that hasn't been initiated because it wasn't on the table, of course. So the design for the full build out is done, is complete. We just had a meeting with First Energy out in the field, make some final tweaks, but our plans are done. Of course, the exercise has been ongoing for the easements to be addressed for the new build, for the build out.
So is that cost factored into the 1.35?
For the infrastructure cost and the proposed new have not been factored into the development budget that was previously presented. And so the understanding with looking at the budget that John put together was that the city was going to fund the infrastructure piece. Now, if it changes and we have to build that in, we can definitely build that into the financial application. And, depending on the cost, we couldn't build in, well, we could technically build in the entire budget, and we ran that both ways. But it was our understanding that the city was interested in doing the
What's
infrastructure.
135 go to if we build that in?
It doesn't go to 1.35. There is, I don't have the numbers in front of me, I don't want to speculate on, but we did run those numbers. I ran every scenario possible that I could think of on how the project would be funded. But it eats up pretty much more than all of because it was like about $1 million, 750,000 would eat up the excess for sure. Yes, sir.
Let me just talk to the easements. We're going to get an update, but I think that we can, at this point, we're really very far along in the process of getting the easements for the original project. Actually, further than we've ever been. As far as the land swap goes, we're going to hear that that has been pretty much signed off by certain people. I think it's in front of the Attorney General. So that land swap would happen. So that's one reason why we're kind of here tonight, is because these things are going to take some time. But the original transfers and easements we move along pretty quickly.
You say the land swap takes care of the easement problem?
No, it does not. We need both. We couldn't do this project without the land swap. So I guess I need to hear from Mike, and as far as, do we spend the money to put in a temporary, because we're starting all over, am I right? If you go this other route?
To do the temporary route, basically, there's an existing, I believe it's a 4-inch water main that runs onto Norfolk Southern's property that we would cut over, and then it would be utilizing the existing grinder pump for the sanitary that serves the restroom building at the boat launch. Both of those are sized likely just for that project, so ultimately you'd be putting your sanitary, your lift station, your water line in for the, we'll call it permanent solution to develop the whole site anyways. And to Russ's point, had we had this conversation, maybe a year ago, you might have saved a little bit of time, but just based on now the additional easements, additional design, and the fact that you're doing this work, knowing you're going to be following it up with additional work anyways that have similar construction timelines, I don't think it saves time, and it's definitely more expensive. I didn't get a chance to forward this to the rest of council, but Russ did provide a report earlier today. Basically, it shows a map of what the additional easements would look like, and then also cost estimates for what the temporary construction would be of the water line and sanitary line to get to.
What is that?
So, the interim cost of construction is roughly $100,000 for the interim solution, the short-term temporary, and our full build out, we're roughly $500,000. So that's, there's a cost savings. The issue is we're at the point of, again, it's just probably the unfortunate situation of the timing of this, where the easements for the build out have been in progress, and we would still have to, one, initiate some design modifications for the interim solution, and then address the easements needed that are different than the full build out, and then add that additional cost to your build out anyways at some point in time. So unfortunately, there's not a gap in timeline where you make up that benefit cost. If it was 6 months or a year, you'd probably make sense, but now you're on the same path as timeline wise.
So basically, we'd be starting.
You'd be spending money while you're ready to do the full build out.
And as you said, we'd have to, for the rest of the property, we'd have to put in this build out.
Yeah, you're still right.
Yeah,
This interim is just specifically the service that you guys.
You're getting there, but it's not.
So the 500 plus, we'd be spending 600
That's correct.
if we did the temporary instead of 500 for the whole thing. So the 750 to $1 million is actually closer to 500 now. Is that what you're saying?
The total cost.
Two different options.
You got it right there in front of
The total cost for,
The infrastructure new.
yeah, with all engineering and all, you're talking about.
Yeah, you said 500. Is that
That's the construction dollars.
okay?
So they're just expecting on top of that.
It's still 750.
Well,
Maybe a
we're,
little less.
total estimated cost, project cost is probably gonna be about $600,000.
And that's a little better than 750.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, and I'll share too, we've had some encouraging discussion with some of the utilities as well, that have helped potential modification on the revenue sharing side of it in terms of what they're willing to contribute to the construction, so that's helped contribute to the reduced construction costs on our end as well.
Russ, how confident are you in that existing infrastructure? Are you prepared for surprises? Are some surprises factored in, or?
We have no confidence in the existing infrastructure. I say that tongue in cheek.
I just
Basically,
wanted to hear it for myself.
Well, one of the contingencies, I would say probably less on the water, maybe it needs to be flushed and so forth.
Right.
On the sewer side, there needs to be some sort of inspection, condition rating, and how, is it gonna tie in and work and all that good stuff, so.
Right.
I'm from our perspective, the staff of the city might feel differently about that in the sewer department.
Yeah, I got a question. It would be for Corey, but sure. What would, if any, impact us backing the loan have on our ability to borrow as a city?
Well, that's, Mr. Dyke ended up sending me a sample sieve. I don't know if that's what you sent, Teresa. The sample sieve of what a guarantee would look like. And just reading through it, I mean, that's something that we need to flesh out is on the guarantee side, there is a disclaimer in here about entering into other agreements that might violate a performance of our guarantor status. So that's something as we go through this process, I'd like to see how that would be an impact on our future debt borrowing and so
I mean, does it show up on our balance sheet as a liability or?
that, reading this, it looks like and thanks to Teresa today too, talking about creating a reserve on the Port Authority side, I think what help us too is that if we have to reserve or commit those funds every year, then yeah, that'll have an impact on our bank.
Yeah, let's play best case scenario where they're making payments, everything's going just the way it's planned. Does that impact our ability to borrow at all if we're guaranteed?
That's what I don't know what that answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to push out.
But just from a high level, I would say the fact that you have to quote unquote encumber or lock up that $140,000 a year just under budget alone, just from a cash flow perspective when you're talking underwriting,
Just in case.
it might be a discussion topic. I don't know that it would necessarily harm anything from a statutory debt capacity limit because it's not technically general obligation debt. It's a loan program, just the same as like a PWC loan or OWDA loan. Those aren't on our balance sheet as debt per se. They're loans that we repay with revenue sources dedicated to them, but it'd be something we have to answer and show there's a dedicated revenue source and we're just the guarantor in case something happens.
Yeah, so not 100% sure yet.
Let's say it's a perfect scenario and everything goes better than expected. Can they refinance it in 10 years?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you can prepay. I mean,
from
this
the
is, it's a structure that after, I think it's after the first 3 years, you can prepay. Or you could, in 10 years, maybe the Port Authority is at a financial position where they could just take it out. I mean, there's a lot of different alternatives once you get past the first 3 years. And then to the point on the impact on the city's capacity, Michael DePerna, who's the underwriter, is going to provide a ton of insight. He's phenomenal, and he manages all of the bond transactions for all the Port Authorities that do bonds in the state of Ohio. He started the State of Ohio Bond Fund, so he really will be able to help you look at that, and run through those details. And he underwrites these for SIB, and so he will be a resource to you as you explore what is the impact overall and how does that change your balance sheet. So he's going to be a resource if you go forward with that.
We'd likely want to run it through Mr. Cicino too, who's our
Yes.
municipal
Sure.
finance advisor, just to make sure.
Looking past the construction piece for a minute, I forget what we talked about. I mean, how many jobs, how many employees do they have, and what are they bringing to the table when the building's
Might know
built?
the specifics on that.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics. Joe, do you know the
In
specifics?
their RFQ, they say 10 to 14
Okay.
scientific jobs that will be located.
You mentioned that you've worked with Toledo and I think Vermilion Port Authority, right? So play this out where you've got an entity now that I assume is just a board, right? You don't have infrastructure and CFO and stuff like that, is that correct?
For the first
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it's a committee.
But once you start making transactions in this dollar value, right, you're gonna need a CFO and you're gonna need that infrastructure and operations, right? Two questions. How do you ensure to the citizens that you're getting the same level of accountability that we get from Corey, right, as a city? But the second one is, was that factored in? Because I would think they're gonna have, the Port Authority is gonna have to start hiring full-time people and have an office and things like that, outputted.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they're a public entity and would be held to the same level of accountability that you would be held to. So, because they haven't had a significant balance sheet historically, it may not have appeared that way. But at the point that they start doing economic development and begin holding assets and begin that process, then their accountability and transparency is exactly the same as yours. So from that perspective, I think the citizens can have comfort that there is full disclosure and everything is public. At some point, they would have to hire staff. I mean, that would be the long-term goal. Like, let's bring in another resource to this community that can help supplement what's going on from the city's perspective and what they're trying to do, you know, with the economic development portion.
And is that factored into the 135?
That's not, no, but we haven't gone down the path of what that, I mean, they wouldn't need staff initially. I mean, to do this project, they could contract those services out in the first couple of years and build up the capacity. This is a long-term play to get, one way or another, if you're gonna build up your port authority, you have to invest in it. And either you do it through resources of the city or you do it through development. Those are the two paths. And this is sort of the ideal development where you have a very strong anchor tenant with enough cash flow that can build some capacity. So, you know, it's one way or the other, but it's not going to be like the day that this development goes on, that there's a light switch that turns and they need staff immediately. It would be a longer term play where they would build up their capacity. And then once they start getting the recognition and having the capacity to do deals, then they can bring more resources to the community. There are funds that they could attract as a port authority that could then also help build that capacity. So it won't be just solely on this pot of money that's coming in. The idea is gradually build their capacity and gradually pick up their staffing. Initially, I would recommend that they have some sort of consulting relationship with somebody that can service in that role. Don't add staff until you got to add staff. And then at some point, hopefully, they would be strong enough that they could bring in somebody that could build that capacity.
But my question is, regardless of whether the OpEx is contracted out for 2 years and then permanent after 3 years, or permanent to begin with, is that factored into the cost model that you were presenting to us?
No, that was not built into the model. And technically, the model can operate without them having staff ever. Because the management contract is built into, there's a management contract for the facility. That operating facility has a management contract built into it. And so that's included in the expenses, but it's not staff. That's a management contract that would be a separate arrangement for the operation of that facility. So legalistically, the Port Authority could act as the borrower, and they could lead this development publicly and never have to put another person on staff to manage that. Okay? And really the objective is, again, to build up their capacity for future developments and to bring additional resources to the community.
So what you're saying is what is built into the calculation is the management contract to do what I think Mr. Hagan's
I wasn't
asking.
clear because we were talking about staffing. The Port Authority will not be directly responsible for staffing the daily operations of that facility. There's a management contract that's built into the expenses that is built into that 1.3x. Yes.
The management contract is for the site itself, the project itself.
Yeah.
Administratively, and I can speak to experience in Corrigan too, this isn't a huge lift. This project on its own operates 2 biannual payments, it's, you know, a couple of reviews of loan documents. They have a treasurer, they have a committee that they run these things through. This project on its own, I don't think, to back up Teresa's point, this doesn't require some large expansion of the Port Authority. The discussion is long-term, what does the 50 grand a year do in terms of legitimizing the organization going forward? That's the bigger discussion, but not specific to this project.
No.
If that makes sense.
Also built in is there something where the Port Authority is giving the city?
Yeah, I had seen and I don't know if it's on this one, I haven't seen the most recent, but one of the initial pro formas that we were provided, I believe from Cody, included in name a tip payment, basically. It was like $10,000 to $15,000. I can't remember exactly what it was.
15,000.
15.
Annually?
Yeah, what's that? Yeah, annually, yeah. So obviously this wouldn't be a tip per se, just because of the nature of public agencies all being involved. But it was included on there, and that would be essentially this development's piece of the broader site as the funding strategy for the city long-term to pay off the infrastructure up front. The strategy, and just back to 2011 when the city created the TIF on the site, was ultimately knowing there was going to be initial infrastructure costs to catalyze the site to prepare for development. There was going to need to be a revenue source beyond just the income tax for the jobs created or potential residents on the site as well. Utilizing the TIF was the preferred option, one I tend to agree with as well. Being public agencies, there wouldn't be any particular property taxes created through this.
Future private development.
future private development would.
Funding source.
Correct. But at least this gives some justification and some, I'll say, level of comfort for council that there is a little bit of an initial revenue source right off the bat. And then the hope would be, again, you know, if you build it, they'll come, like mentality on this. So you have your anchor tenant to start things off, and future private development, yes, would kick that back. I'm not as familiar with how the TIF works on residential development. I just want to work out the logistics. I know it's handled a little bit differently than private or commercial, but just add that too.
I guess I'd like to hear from anybody, maybe Ross or Mike and Corey. What would be the advantage of a private developer coming in and doing that versus what we just heard?
So the advantage I would say would just be the fact that it's the cleanest in terms of a liability standpoint from the city. You're putting the liability that I think we all feel a level of comfort that there basically is a 20-year term on the lease, but to the extent that if you want to say it's only 10 that you have fixed, you put the liability in terms of the financial performance of this on a private developer with their own capital. And it's not something ultimately that they do go to funk, they do leave, whatever the case may be, the court order folds financially, this doesn't work out, that the city and its general tax dollars aren't backing this project of building a private facility. But that would be the counter argument that I would say at least needs vetted and flushed out. That'd be one of my initial reactions. But again, to Teresa's point too, the opportunity to maintain some of the offsets and those revenue sources directly from the development, it's a unique opportunity. Just it'd be something different that the city hasn't really ever endeavored on before, but it's worth at least a discussion.
And I think if I can just add one thing from my experience with the Toledo Port Authority, they finance a majority of their operations through revenues for projects like this. That's where, I mean, they get a levy, but it's like 3% of their operating budget. So where do they get the money to pay for 20 full-time staff members? They get it from doing projects like this. And that kind of revenue, this is a small project comparatively to what could be done. And so just, to that point, it is a future revenue source for this community that could become sustainable. And that's the model that we were kind of looking at, was how the Toledo Port has funded their operations and continues to hold real estate and do economic development. And that's the benefit of having a strong port, is that you have that capacity to hold real estate and to drive development in tandem with the partners for the economic development of the whole community.
But we'll say from a Port Authority perspective, the opportunity for them to hold and acquire land is definitely attractive for the city. We know of the potential for land acquisition, especially with some of the conversations with Norfolk Southern, close to 250 acres roughly along the entire corridor, everything they own, all the way up to the line plant south and south of Route 6. So the opportunity to have another agency that's working with us in tandem on an economic development strategy, and ultimately they're holding, and it's not on the city's financial books in terms of whatever those mortgage payments would be. Obviously, cash-wise, we would never be able to take it all down at the same time. So the opportunity for that and just having that under public control that we can help dictate and drive the development discussion long-term, I think is huge. So also, it's a substantial amount of money that it would take to get that property under contract, but it's a potential opportunity. Something to consider.
Teresa, based on your experience with the Toledo Port Authority, are you seeing certain, potential businesses or certain industries that having an active, viable port authority would attract a different vein of potential growth and development than if we didn't have an active port authority?
Yeah, one of the things that the Toledo Port does so well is they utilize their capacity of tax exemption to be a conduit for commercial development.
Yes.
And pass that savings on to the developers, and it becomes a very strong attraction tool for higher-end developers who are more experienced and more sophisticated. They're looking for that benefit, and so having a port authority that can be part of that transaction and do a capital, basically a long-term lease with the entity and the developer and pass through that tax savings on the construction is very, very attractive. And you've seen it if you follow the other port authorities down in Findlay. It's the county down there. Blanchard, they had like 3 or 4 names with it, but the port authority that covers Findlay has done this for many, many years and has provided and attracted a lot of economic development using that tool alone and being the conduit for those kind of resources. And that's really the value of that.
Thank you.
It's not a small point to gloss over either. The sales tax savings of construction materials of these projects, I mean, it's an inherent 7% discount
Right.
immediately on all
It's
construction.
direct to the budget. I mean,
Yeah.
that's real money.
By going through the port authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's real capital when you start looking at a transaction.
In other communities, port authorities are really workhorses. Ours is unbelievably underutilized. We've missed opportunities, I'm sure.
It takes the investment to get it to a place where it can be a contributing factor. And you have the structure and you have the willingness. And what I've seen in this community that I haven't seen, and I've worked in a lot of communities in Northwest Ohio for a long time, 30 years. I've been doing this kind of interface. You have a very strong interface between the city and the representative. I've seen open communication, transparency that you don't always see in other communities. And that's the other thing that kind of got me excited about this project, was I really felt like there was some synergies going on where everybody involved saw the value, and it wasn't just one party. And that's what's going to make this project work long term.
Is there an opportunity where the city, through its administrative services, could serve as a bridge, almost as like a fiscal agent, or I mean, what's the terminology within an entity?
Fiscal responsibility,
Yeah, it's also a term that the state auditor uses.
owning it.
Yeah, component unit, thank you. Almost as the Port Authority starts to grow, but maybe hasn't hit the level that it actually needs staffing. We do this with our joint rec district, with the Parks and Recreation, where essentially they're city employees. City council drives the budget, we're the fiscal agent, we file for the Huron joint rec district, the city files all of its financial regulatory documents with the state auditor's office. Just as a first step to see, just, you know, somebody in our office could serve as the executive director. I mean, obviously, unless someone in the township is interested in it as well, we'd have to run it by them, but I don't know, just as an idea, kick around as like a short-term bridge to build their staffing up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really going to require you to think outside the box on how you interface as partners, and how you can strategically leverage your resources for the advancement of that project, but also for the entire community. And it's really going to take thinking like that. Like I said, this is what's attractive to me as an economic development person, is those kind of conversations. Like, how can we make this work? Not what roadblocks can we throw up and try to stop this, but how can we leverage our resources to make it be a win-win-win-win-win for everybody? And it's, yeah, I think that's really, and those are the kind of conversations that I think are the next step of how do you formalize this and how do you build that.
Okay, go ahead.
So I guess the question is, do we want to continue to move forward, right?
Well, I think we need to find out. I don't want the staff spending a lot of time if council doesn't have the acceptance to go down this path with the port authority. We have to decide what we want to do. Are we going to go that way, or are we going to go with bringing in an outside developer? And so I was trying to get some dialogue back and forth and trying to get an understanding of what the pros and cons are for both sides. And that's exactly my opinion. And I'm a little excited about this now because we do see the light at the end of the tunnel for the land swap and the easements. If you know, so we're going to have to make that decision pretty quickly as far as the infrastructure, which I guess I don't think that's a question anymore. Put in the infrastructure. I think we're at a point where we know we're going to have to do that. But seeing as how we're getting this close, I don't want the staff working on a direction if we're going to come back, as you just said, come back down the road and maybe say, yeah, we don't want to go that route. I'd like to get a feel for where council is at today, so that staff is headed in the right direction, not just wasting time. Is there interest
I mean,
to,
I think with Teresa's presentation, which I thought was great, is that when it comes, first of all, you said if we make an application, we're not tied into anything. But we, at least the ball's moving forward, we can see what we're required to do, what we
Yeah.
need. I mean, I think that might be the first step, because we're not tied to anything. It's not, it, yeah, I mean, Mike brought up some good points, and as far as economic development, as far as the Port Authority bringing in these businesses and more economic, I mean, I can't, it's like a win-win situation, is, my feeling.
Yeah, and I think if I can just add, until you apply to the SIB and find out what it's really going to cost and what the risk is to the city, I would not recommend pursuing going down a different path. Because ultimately, that's the one that's the biggest opportunity for you from a standpoint of the strategy that you're trying to execute. You can always on the back end go to a private developer and get somebody to develop this. That, in my mind, would be like the exit strategy on how do we get this done if we don't want to do it ourselves.
right?
But I think my recommendation would be to explore fully the opportunity for how can you keep this internally. And with the SIB application, it's an initial application, it's not that complex. We would be happy to help with getting the initial SIB application done, just because I know how to craft the narrative for that. And really, that would be the initial start. And then from there, you can have conversations with underwriting and get a determination on what the risk is, what the obligation would be, and really have a clear picture of what you're looking at. And then you can make a logical determination on whether that makes sense to go forward, or then you can consider an alternative.
Okay, we're getting close to time, we have to wrap up. So I guess we can take a vote, or council can just, agree that we want to let the city manager and staff continue down this path.
I don't know if this would interfere with applying for the SIB, but what is continuing to stick in my craw is we're a 50-50 joint port authority, yet one entire 50% of it wants nothing to do with it. And I understand the financial, but A, there's nothing out of pocket for them. They're just backing along. So they're not writing a check. And B, we're not in any better shape financially than they are. So I'd like to peel back the onion on that a little bit more. Why is it they want nothing to do with this?
Who wants to have that conversation?
Well, I was going to say, I could call Gordy or Ed on my own if you guys want. That's fine with me, but I'd like to get a little more insight on it.
I'd like to offer to be a part of that conversation if I can help with that, just because I don't think it's fair to just carte blanche ask them to agree to guarantee or not guarantee without having an understanding of what does that look like, and having a full conversation of what we're proposing, and the idea of we may get into, they may say they'll agree to take the initial step and see what underwriting comes back with. I don't know, but I think if I can help in that conversation, I would offer to be a part of that conversation if you think there's value in doing that.
That's fine with me. I assume they're up to speed because it sounds like Gordon's on.
I'm supportive. I mean, I think, all along, I want to see development over there. So yeah, I'm supportive. I don't know if it was already sent out, and I apologize if I didn't see it, but I'd like to see the cash flow pro forma that, did you say Hody did it?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a public record, but I would like to see that, just to kind of go through it and look at it and just kind of see where the numbers.
Things going all the way. I mean, sounds like maybe the township got a similar presentation we're getting tonight.
No, they have not. No, they have
No,
not.
I know, I'm saying if they did get that, then that's the discussion afterwards that Joel's talking about, because what you're saying is they need to understand it and then all the benefits, just like we're understanding, if they're 50, to your point, if they're 50%, if they're half of it, then they should, I mean, their stake is slightly different because they don't own the property, but it's still a.
And you're exactly right. Gordon's just one person on that committee, and, they haven't, the group of trustees has not seen this presentation.
And once they understand, people like you said, they're not ready to chat.
You know, Christine, do you have any comments?
I think it's a bigger picture than this one project. If we can keep it as a collaborative effort and help build the Port Authority, I think the city ultimately benefits from having a strong Port Authority. I think it is an attractive group to have in your corner and work together as, I mean, that river has got a lot of potential. I think having another player on our team moving forward is nothing but a win-win all around.
Okay, so, and I agree, so to wrap this up, it sounds like we're going to ask you to make a presentation to the township, find out from them what their interest is, and then we'll come back and make a final decision if we want to go down this path.
I think, can we go ahead and apply for the SIP?
Yeah, I mean, you can, we
Why
can,
not, why not keep the thing going? Like I said, we're not tied
You
into
want this
anything.
then on the SIP. Or we have find out there going to be,
I'm presenting our final summary, the first week of August, but next Wednesday, I think it is what I'm presenting to the Port Authority Board. I don't know that that's all the trustees. It's not. So that would be a separate presentation if we're talking about engaging the trustees.
Unless you can get them to
Could you
go to the
invite
meeting.
So legally, do they have to, does the township have to approve the project at some point?
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
They would likely have to approve through resolution applying for the SID loan, would be my guess, regulatory, but not the project itself. It would just be affirmation that they're going to participate as a guarantor on the loan application. That's typical process on state loan project, but that'd be.
And that would be the second step, because on the initial application is basically, we have this concept, we have this project, we're going to put it into the SIB to say, high level, does this look like what you guys can be a part of? So
We can
that's
go ahead and do that, correct?
we can pull that trigger whenever you,
Yep.
whenever you say you'd like to submit that. We've had multiple conversations with them, so they're familiar with the concept.
So, Mike, are you
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
go ahead and pull that trigger?
Yep.
Is that something we have to vote on, or just go ahead and do it?
Well, everybody, unless somebody disagrees.
Yeah.
Okay, the next thing is then, wrap this up, then there's going to be a presentation to,
Yeah,
Do
I think
what?
that probably should be part of the actual session.
Be a motion on the
Regular
agenda.
meeting, a regular meeting on that.
you want to take a vote then at the regular meeting or just discuss? All right,
Thank you, Teresa.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I think
Teresa.
I
Okay.
think we've got a lot of
Everyone has my
questions.
contact information, so if there are questions afterwards, I'm fully available, and Joe, you can reach me if you don't have it. Feel free to pull me in, and however I can help on the SIP,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you. All right, unfortunately, we're just a little bit over. Terry, are you ready to go into the regular meeting? Everybody ready?
Let's adjourn.
Can we take a break?
Yeah, I think
All
we
right,
have
all right, 5 minutes, we'll bring
We
you.
got to adjourn.
Breathing break.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have to adjourn from the motion to adjourn from.
Make a motion and we adjourn the work session.
All right,
All in favor?
Aye.
thank you. 5 minutes.
My pleasure.
This is the-
All right, let's call to order this city council meeting for July 29th. Please stand for a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Crawford. Here. Boggs.
Here.
Pat.
Here.
Martino.
Here.
Dykes.
Here.
Hardy.
Here.
Hagy.
Here.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for being a little bit late. We had quite a conversation going on at the workshop. So next on the agenda is approval of minutes. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we approve the minutes of June 8th joint council finance committee work session and the minutes of June 23rd council work session. As written.
Discussion? Please call the roll.
Klaus.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Dykes.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Hagy.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Okay, next is audience comments. Madam Clerk, do you have any?
I do. The first is from Brian Harris, 330 Vernon Road. Our mayor extolled we will follow state and CDC guidelines while refusing to wear masks properly almost the entire city council meeting. Does he have a reason he did this? We are a red county that sets an example of bad luck. Next, I have an email we received from Peggy Hutchinson. Dear Huron City Council, those of us who own cottages at the Breakwater Inc. and the Nickel Plate Association would appreciate clarification from the city regarding the use of the beach east of the ravine. First, let me explain that I own cottages on both the Breakwater and the Nickel Plate side. In my possession is a copy of a survey completed by Daniel E. Hartung Jr., dated 9/26/95, of the Nickel Plate Association's property when purchased from the railroad. That survey states we own the property east of McKinley Street to the old Homestead subdivision, north to the Lake Erie shoreline. Our association pays to maintain our beach and it should be considered private, yet police have expelled family of our cottage owners from the beach. My understanding is the city leases from the railroad the rest of the beach at the park and east of the ravine, for example, the beach in front of the Breakwater Inc. cottages. However, the city does not maintain the park in front of the Breakwater cottages. Prior to the July 4th weekend, paid patrons of Nickel Plate Park were being told by the attendant that east of the ravine was private. At the time, a Breakwater Inc. resident had erected no trespassing sign between the ravine and the beach in front of the Breakwater cottages and was told that was inappropriate because the city does not want to maintain, was appropriate because the city does not want to maintain the beaches in front of the cottages. However, during the July 4th weekend, the no trespassing signs were removed, by whom I don't know. In addition, some cottage owners, including me, were approached by police during the weekend and told all beach in front of the cottages is public, except for the 75 feet in front of the Nickel Plate Association's cottages. During that weekend and this past weekend, east of the ravine to the old homestead property has been jammed with non-cottage owners, some of whom don't clean up after themselves. If the city and the police force have decided to clear the entire beach at the park and east of the ravine, as well as the portion of beach owned by Nickel Plate Association for the use of people who pay to park at Nickel Plate Park, then the city should be maintaining the entire beach. Any clarification the city can provide regarding this issue would be appreciated. And lastly, we have an email received from Lisa Steiner. She's a cottage G3 in Breakwater. Hello, those of us who own cottages at the Breakwater Inc. and at the Nickel Plate Association would appreciate clarification from the city regarding the buoys and boat lane. It is nice to see a designated swim area on the park side. However, it is confusing to many kayakers and sea-doos. It appears to them as a boat lane along the danger zone of the breakwall. Police do come quickly to tell them to leave that area. Also, this year, the boat lane and buoys have been placed right in front of our beach. Previous years, it has been in front of the grass between our beach and Old Homestead. When Teddy Temper has been asked about the placement, he replies, ask the police. This year, with the overcrowding problem we have with many public people coming over from the park over, people from boats add to the chaos. Once more, the police come quickly to tell swimmers and people on floats they are in the boat lane. Many of us would like to know why has the boat lane been moved to our beach. Wondering if there will be a reevaluation of the boat lane, or is this in response to the survey of the safety zones of Riptide? That's it.
You want to respond to any of this?
Well, the only thing I want to say is that we not only, I do realize that I did pull my mask down, pull on my nose a couple of times, it was fogging up my glasses. But not only that, we have maintained social distance. And if the couple of times that I did that, if that person's offended, I apologize. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
About the second.
Do we want to address this? Or better, you want to do that?
Do you want to do it now, or I've got more follow-up on that, I've been in contact with her, and staff has worked on some things.
Okay.
Well, we want to do that under new business.
That's
And
fine.
Part of it kind of falls under safety, so I can address it then.
Okay. Okay. All right, let's move along to old business. Any updates on the land swap, the kind of land swap and the legal discussion?
Yes, sir. The law director received, or had the legal description reviewed recently and approved by Doug Green. That has now been sent to ODNR. We were advised by email just this past Monday, July 27th, that everything looked good on their end. So we are now waiting for approval from the Ohio Attorney General's office about the land swap itself.
Next on the agenda, under old business, we're going to add the transient rental regulations. We were intended to talk a little bit about that in the workshop, but we didn't get to that, so we're adding that under old business. Go ahead.
We're still working on the legislation for the transient rentals. We're still looking at what some of the other jurisdictions have done, what has worked, what has been upheld by courts in order to make sure that when we get something, we present it to the council, that it's a complete picture and that it should be sufficient to meet the city's needs going forward for a long period of time.
Some discussion?
I just have a question. What are the main legislation changes that you're looking at? I mean, I think we've been told generically parking and occupancy, number of people per room plus something per household, and then whether there's an ability to have some restriction of total number of rentals within the city, or if that's going to be kind of a later issue. So I'm just trying to think of what categories are you looking at? So.
And that's part of what is driving this, and in some instances, actually slowing it down, trying to figure out how can we address some of those issues. But there may be some issues that we may have to look at, rezoning, having like spot zoning or community zoning or things of that nature in order to address some of those issues about overcrowding, about being able to ensure that the city remains a community and not just a collection of rental houses. So that's some of what it's kind of looking at. What are those issues? What are all the various things that need to go into this in order to make it viable, in order to make it work for the city, for its residents, and to meet all of the city's objectives. We're looking at, one of the main things is to make sure that the owners of the properties are accountable, to their neighbors, to the city itself, and to their renters, so that way we have responsible owners. We don't have just somebody buying property from Florida and never seeing it, and then it creates a community problem. So that's some of the things that we're looking at and trying to address to make sure that we have that level of accountability.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to meet with a group of owners, because I'm not one, so I wanted to be enlightened. And they had issues with the process, but I was able to talk to them about everything that was done and the amount of meetings that were open, and they were okay with that. But it really came down to two things. One, this came out of nowhere, which again, I was able to talk to them about that, but I think it's something we have to address as a council, is how do we get stuff like this out better, anyway. The second one, though, was interesting and never would have occurred to me, which is, it's a timing issue with the tax going into effect. And that the owners would have to carry the burden for this year, because when people signed up for this year, they did it last year when there was no tax. So I just thought that was an interesting perspective, and I wanted to share with you guys. The other thing is, and Monty, you and I talked about this in the working session, the 90-10, right? I discussed the proposed new rules with them. They have no issue with any of them. So to our point, 90-10, right? But I think it's something that we ought to at least address, is that if that 3% is going to have to come out of their pocket. They're not going to be able to pass that on to the customers.
And Joel, just to that point, and Corey can probably make some comments. I asked, because you asked me a question about it, and Sam had asked me a question about that tax, and I talked to Corey, and he followed up with the county, and we have a method of giving some relief on the 3% for rents that had already been booked prior to the passing of legislation. So I'll let Corey kind of explain.
Yeah, Joe. So Mark called me this morning. I talked to Heather at the county. She was really helpful. The county, if you remember, the county passed at 4% back in early 2019, late 2018. So they went through the same process that we're currently going through. So what she and the county is doing is every time someone calls, there's a question about that. She is just instructing them, this is up for council's discussion too, if this is the way you want them to handle those calls, and us as well, is don't bother to report those revenues for anything that was booked prior to May 1st. Now, she is encouraging them to do good faith effort to try to collect that 3% and keep documentation to show that these people did book it prior to May 1st. You made a good effort, just in case something comes up in the future where our code enforcement officer needs to look at something, or there's any type of review that needs to be done.
Let me ask a question about that concept, though, because Mark and I were talking about this last night. So if they submit to pay the 4% to the county and stay silent on the city, wouldn't the county just tack that on automatically and not knowing when it was booked to be rented?
She's actually, and this kind of takes a little revenue away from the county too, but she's actually encouraging them to not book that revenue at all. So that takes some of the 4% away. It's more of just a kind of grace period there that, but as of today or as of May 1st, you should be reporting all of your taxes or all of your gross revenues. So this is anything that you booked after May 1st, like actually booked it.
Actually, May 1st, 2020.
Yeah, then you should already be tagging that 3 to 4% on.
So people that have booked in 2019 for September 2020, don't record that.
Do good, do a good faith effort to try to collect that the best you can. I mean, I realize I don't own a property either, but I believe you normally try to collect your full payment a week or two before, and I know there's probably a down payment that's put onto it, but I mean, at that time, I don't know if that's the best way to try to collect that 3%, just because this legislation became effective May 1st.
Right.
I think it's a great plan.
Yeah, I mean,
don't know if
that's
it's
fair.
emotional or
I've had
what.
some phone calls because they run into that.
Yeah, and that's what they did with Vermillion. They did that with themselves, with the county back in 19. But that's a decision. They went through this whole thing, and now that they have that experience, this is what they're recommending. That's what she's going to tell people calling from the city of Huron right now. If council wants her to pursue any other way, I can let her know. But I just wanted to.
So the dates should be the date in our legislation, anything booked after May 1st, because we passed it in March, gave it until May 1st to implement. Obviously, COVID hit in between, but so anything they booked after May 1st, they're going to be responsible to collect it And then, you know, we talked about it on the phone, you know, should there be a cutoff of, you know, January 1, 2000, you know, or January 1, 2021 is really a cutoff. After that point, I mean, you shouldn't have anything that was booked, you know, 2 years in advance. So it seems like maybe we should prepare some kind of statement that can go, you know, through Doug's office, get the word out and through zoning and when people are applying, and then maybe a notice can be sent. And now we have all the information on all the people that have already applied. So it would be pretty easy to send emails to, or a message or a letter to them saying, this is how we're gonna deal with it.
But this goes back to the communication thing, because all 3 of the owners I was talking to had not applied yet because of this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we gotta figure out a way to get the word out to those folks who are kind of hiding until the end of this season.
Yeah.
That's basically what they're doing.
I got a phone call from somebody that actually did go ahead and do what they were supposed to do, and then they called me.
And Heather at the county said to give everyone her number. Maybe I can get something together for everyone from council, you can just hand to them. But yeah, she's been very helpful, and that's her job to answer questions at the county. So
It's a great solution.
yeah.
So do we have to make a motion for this, or do anything
I don't
legislatively?
believe so, it's just a procedure that they can go through, and it's really counties. We're not changing anything.
Right, yeah. It's nothing that we're adopting as
Yeah.
a source.
So, but we do need to direct staff to prepare some means of getting the word out through communication, through website, through people that have already applied, and then obviously we're in the position to spread the word to people we've already communicated with, like the
Just a question on that though, because let's say that somebody booked before May 1st and they decided not to record it, and then someone threw a flag out, you know, came after for it, right? We don't have anything in writing or official that says you didn't have to record anything prior to May 1st. I don't know that the likelihood of that is high, but
Well, I think that goes back to, the counties primarily want collecting that, if I understand correctly. So that goes, that should be on the county then, as that's their communications as to, when their taxes took effect.
yeah, it's our policy.
Their taxes took effect 2 years ago.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
it's, so I have to look and see exactly how our legislation was on that. I mean, we could potentially draft something up in order to make that, or, I guess we could do a vote, but in order to make sure that everybody understands what it is, we'd probably be better off having something in terms of a resolution or something that outlines exactly what we're doing.
And I hate the domino effect, but you said you talked to people who've already paid, did they get a refund?
Well, they went in, well,
Well, if they collected it.
it was my bad. Somebody had gone in and registered.
Yeah, they collected it, they should pay it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were told,
Right.
yeah, they were told this and this, and I spoke to Mike about this, and the county's asking for April too, or is it take back in May, and I had thought, actually, on my bad, I thought 2021, I told discuss the leeway, but I was wrong on that, so. I talked to John, he's fine, but now he'll be a lot more happy to go with this.
But the idea is to encourage people to ask their renter, hey, this passed in May, we're supposed to be collecting it. If someone refuses, it's kind of the honor system on that part of it.
Right.
Is what at least the intent of our, if we do have to draft something, I think that should be part of the word. But in the meantime, I think that's the program. To Joel's point, sounds like maybe we may need to draft something for our next meeting to at least cover some tails.
Okay,
Does that?
we can work on that, yes.
And I will discuss briefly the reason we started looking at these other ordinances was because citizens brought up these issues. We got phone calls, we got some emails. So that's why this group got back together to take a look at what can be done to address some of those issues. When legal council is done with their process, we will be presenting this. There'll be at least a 3 reading and probably a public hearing, imagine, on the 3rd reading. And all those folks, whether they be renters, neighbors, or landlords, will be able to address their concerns. And at that time, they'll hear in detail where we're at. Okay. Any other questions about the engine room? Any discussion? All right, hearing none, let's move on. New business. I'd like to go through these 2 orders, Mike, and then we'll talk about the others.
Yep.
Okay.
We have old business on Showboat.
Oh,
And we have the old business on Showboat still.
Do you have something about that?
Yeah, I can just give a quick, brief update on that one. We've gotten, been advised by the title company that they have kind of expedited the process on trying to get us the preliminary judicial report. We're expecting that now probably by Friday is the anticipated date they've given us. So once we get that, we'll also go back around the council and let everybody know where we are before we proceed on that further.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So next on the agenda, the new business ordinance number 2020-15.
Mr. Mayor, I move that ordinance 2020-15, the 3 reading will be waived and it be placed on its 1st reading.
Any discussion on the waiving 3 reading? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Hagee.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Other.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 2019-27, adopted December 10, 2019, to provide for additional appropriations from the general fund and other funding sources, and an increase in estimated resources, and further approving cash transfers between funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor, because this is in order to get the safe routes to school funding in the right financial bucket, I move that this be an emergency.
Discussion on the emergency. Please call the roll.
Hagee.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Martino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
Hardy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Quick pickup.
Yeah.
Ordinance 2020-15 has supplemental appropriations and addition to estimated resources, and also included our cash transfers between funds. The cash transfers are 3rd quarter transfers for non-discretionary budgetary transfers, which include transfers to our debt funds for debt service liability, pension funds, and any capital improvements that are currently in process. So those transfers are on this legislation for approval. On the supplemental appropriations and estimated resources, as Mr. Hagee noted, they're in accordance with government accounting standards. We have to record any payments made directly from the state, which was during the state route to school project. The state made payments directly to Smith Paving for the grants that we received, and in order to properly account for these, we need to record the revenue side of the budget, the revenue side of it, and the expense. So that will net to 0. In addition, there's an appropriation measure for $22,000 for paving at the Showboat property. That is also included on here, just to kind of note out, and everyone's fully aware that that project's ongoing. So if you have any questions.
Just a confirmation, these are budget neutral, all the moves?
The $22,000 actually is an addition out of Fund 277. That's an additional piece to the budget.
To the good guy.
No, it's an expense.
Expense for
Yeah.
Paving
Expense. I have the requisition in now and properly budget for it for the appropriations.
And can we just get a summary of how that came to be so quickly?
I mean, I received the requisition, and I understand that it was an emergency for the Showboat property just because of the condition that it's in. And it'll help also with our staff, our street staff that's currently maintaining and upkeeping that. So just because I got the requisition, and I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to it a little more too.
Isn't the cost a lot lower because
Yeah.
they're in town?
It is a competitive cost. It's with Erie Blacktop, who's the sub on the asphalt within phase 6, phase 1 of US 6 project. I will say too, just for the benefit of the group and just so the community is fully aware, this isn't, we talked, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago about a full-on typical asphalt project, full finished pavement. It was close to $50,000 at the time. This is the intermediate course, essentially what you put down right before you put the finished pavement on. Long term, I think there was consensus at the time, and I still think that's the belief of council, that ultimately a parking lot in that specific location isn't the long-term desired use in the Showboat site. So the hope would be that this is a 3 to 4 year solution to take the work off of city staff to continually maintain the lot. Really the timing of it is just the nature of the working things out logistically with the existing contractor on site, so.
Well, aesthetics, obviously.
Aesthetics, absolutely.
Is it paving over the existing blacktop, or is it going over to where the dirt is?
Just over the stone.
Yeah, the existing stone that's out there, basically within the fence, that'll be the new segment.
And
It'll be
so
stripes, 88 spots, and
the concern that we had previously about doing anything at that site until that whole title search was cleared and cleaned up,
Right.
we had put everything on hold for plans there, that's been redone.
It's not a lot more.
That doesn't pertain.
Yeah, I did have the same concern, and I did run that through legal, and we were comfortable there.
Okay.
Because it's not lot one, it's not affected.
That was the biggest thing, yeah.
Well, but legal's original was don't do anything there until we get the lot one resolved.
So,
And so that
Bill,
this whole project got tabled, but legal now is
yes.
Well, it's also been brought up by citizens that the safety factor is tough all the staff has been going out there trying to keep those holes filled, and so it really is the safety part of this, and we've all discussed with legal. I think where you actually discussed this with the finance?
Yeah. Finance committee chair, he just recommended that I bring this forward just because of all the COVID impact discussions we've had, and just to be fully transparent that obviously the project started, you can see it going on, so just to be open about this too as well.
Mike?
Yeah.
The extent of the blacktop, is it gonna go up to like the parking barriers? Like where there's some really old original blacktop that was probably like the blacktop from when the Showboat was there 25 years ago? Or is that stopping, they gonna cut a joint? I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand.
They cut a joint and a clean edge to that existing asphalt out there today. They cleared the stone out. So generally, it's limited to what is the stone area of the parking lot.
Okay.
It will join up flush with the existing asphalt, but they did have to trim quite a bit of the edge of the existing asphalt out to get a nice clean butt joint.
Okay, so it's just partially into where those current parking slots are, maybe. I get it, that's what I was saying.
Any other discussion? Please call the roll, final adoption.
Peggy?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
Klaus?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Martino?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Next is ordinance number 2020-16.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
I move that the 3 reading rule be suspended and ordinance number 2020-16 be placed on its first reading.
Any discussion on the placement first reading? Please call the roll.
Hardy?
Yes.
Peggy?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
Klaus?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Martino?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
An ordinance ratifying the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement with Mobility Works Group LLC, authorizing the interim city manager to execute the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement substantially in the form attached to this ordinance upon expiration of the 14-day review period provided for
under section 5709.83 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor, I move that ordinance number 2020-16 be placed as an emergency measure.
Discussion on the emergency measure. Please call the roll.
Hardy?
Yes.
Peggy?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
Klaus?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Martino?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
Mr. Spath.
Thanks, Mr. Aquino. So I mentioned this briefly in the city manager discussion, the previous meeting of city council. Since then, now the CRA agreement has been approved by the school board at their previous meeting, July 21st, so now the next step is probably before us. They have actually, I believe, began some of their site preparation work through their engineering and surveying company to start prep on this in anticipation of approval of the project. Again, another exciting economic development opportunity. I think it's about $1.9 million investment. And once, I'm excited that at least they shared with us some of the initial concepts, the renderings. I'm excited once we go through the entitlement process through planning and zoning to get those renderings out to the public. I think it's going to be pretty exciting news. Again, just to reiterate the specifics on the abatement itself, it's a 15-year property tax abatement, 3 incremental phases, 5 years each at 75%, 50%, 25%. This is a true property tax abatement. In the past, we've done the property tax abatements with then pilot payments back to the school district. So we're handling this following all the existing millage and levies that are in place. So with that, take any other questions, unless there's anything else specifically about the site you guys had any interest in.
Please call the roll on adoption.
Hardy?
Yes.
Peggy?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
Klaus?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Martino?
Yes.
Dyke?
Yes.
Next on the agenda, city manager got a request in writing from Luco Incorporated, discussion on tax abatements. I'll turn it over to
Thank you, Mr. Tino. So Corey and I had met with the owner, Mr. Guerra, who's the author of the letter that was sent to the city. They own Luco Incorporated in Sandusky. They had discussed with us the potential for an economic development incentive package, as they are currently at the position where they have had a proposal to purchase the IC facility accepted, contingent upon, I believe it was a 75-day due diligence process. So at this point in time, this is the request is before City Council for discussion. It's not necessarily an urgent thing that needs to be finalized tonight, but I did just want to bring it up for discussion and then provide some additional commentary. And some of the things that we had shared with Mr. Guerra in our initial meeting. Just historically, as an economic development incentive, an income tax abatement is not typically one of our preferred methodologies. I think that's one of the reasons we kept such a low income tax to begin with. Rather than incentivized by lowering the income tax, we keep the income tax lower in general, just to be essentially a business-friendly community. One thing within the request is not only is it a request to reduce through abatement the net profit of the company, it's also 50% abatement on the payroll tax or withholding tax for all the employees within the company itself. I would say, just from a city financial perspective, obviously our game is to build, promote, and the creation of jobs, and that's ultimately what drives us financially. And so I think it would be a tough sell for council, especially in light of the job decline through the current IEC facility, and just knowing some of the financial impacts we've gone through the last 6 to 8 months relative to COVID-19, that would be something we would entertain. On the reduction or abatement on the net profit side, as I said, obviously this isn't practice that we've used in the past, and I would also, just for a conversational aspect, just hesitate on any consideration of abatement to give the ideal that we're incentivizing a movement essentially from one jurisdiction to the other within the same county. I don't want the perception within the county that this needs to be a business-centric decision for Luco, and I don't want it to be something that the city of Huron incentivize them with is a well-standing company within Sandusky's portfolio to bring them over to the community of the city of Huron. if there is some kind of discussion in terms of utilizing those dollars, and if it's something that the company would ultimately be interested in, my recommendation would be a pledge from the city to repurpose those income tax dollars through the nonprofit back into capital investment within the Sawmill Parkway area in general. And obviously, as you guys all know, there's significant funding challenges in getting that project done, and so anything we can do to help drive funding into that area would be huge. I'd open it up for discussion if anyone has any questions for me or wants to body.
Does the school board have to, would the school board have to approve something like this?
It would not on that project, not on the income tax.
Hey, Mike, question. IAC, are they still in business or are they out?
They're phasing out, I believe the last day we were given was end of August. They're finishing up some contracts that they were anticipating to have done back in May.
How long have you been there?
As long as IAC been there, well, I mean, same you might know, the Lear facility, I think was built. But didn't mean it that way. Yeah, I don't know, Joe, to be honest with you, when IC transitioned in. We did do, through Jobs Ohio and Team Neo, a pretty extensive job creation and retention grant program back in 2013. There was some credits that the state had offered and some infrastructure dollars.
We give them anything as a community?
I think our biggest piece in this, I'd have to go back in the specifics, it was before I was with the city, but our biggest piece, from my recollection, was in-kind contribution on capital on the Rye Beach Road corridor. There might have, I don't believe there was any income tax from our end. I think the state gave them some income tax credits on the job creation.
Because I'm curious if they upheld on their end of the deal, IAC. Is
Yeah.
there anything that we could go back and, if they didn't?
Right.
So I'm interested, if we could look into that. And then second, just a comment, I haven't seen anything, but just what you're saying, I wouldn't support the income tax.
Yeah.
You know, doing that, especially to the city of Sandusky, I don't want to be a part of anything like that as far as me personally. That's how I would vote, so just so you know what I stand.
That's sure.
Is this a done deal? Have they actually made the purchase?
The purchase proposal has been approved by IC's board. It is contingent upon a 75-day due diligence period,
Okay,
of
I'm
which
sorry, I did hear that. I apologize.
one of the bullet points, I haven't actually seen the purchase agreement, one of the bullet points was negotiation of an economic development or incentive package with the city.
And do we know if there were any other interested parties in that facility?
There have been.
It's a pretty clean facility,
It's a
right?
great
It's
facility,
actually highly, attractive.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, the feedback from, we did a walkthrough with the broker, and then we probably had discussions with 3 or 4 other brokers. I know Acadac has been largely involved in it. There's been a lot of interest. It's a favorable site.
Right. So I mean,
It's
just to
unique.
fill that site, we wouldn't have to
Yeah.
do any favors for anybody, I think. And it's pretty early, right, in the process? I mean, they're not even out of there yet.
Yeah, it's only been for sale for a few months here, so.
Yeah, you know, if they looked into any state support.
They have through Jobs Ohio. I don't know the parameters or specifics of what it is. I know Jobs Ohio did offer them a package. It likely job creation credits and some capital, probably unique financing for equipment internal.
So Mike, they would be moving completely out of their First Street facility and they
No,
have,
I don't
they
think-
have stuff over at Cleveland Park or no?
So it wouldn't be a complete move. They would still have an operation within Sandusky. They'd be moving a portion of the business over here. It's about, he gave us some job projections. Their initial phase started in 2021, the hope to be between 150 and 200 jobs, ramping up to about 275 towards I think 2025. This is pro forma. And then there still was a footprint of the operation that would stay in Sandusky. So, well, that's work.
I mean, I guess I agree, but I'd be hesitant on an income tax cut. And again, like you said, working with our neighbors, I don't want to pit people against each other, pulling somebody from somebody, community next to us that we hope to work with.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
you know, if there's other incentives that he may, you know, be interested in, it's something he can look into. But as far as the income tax, I think we would kind of open up a can of worms, you know, down the road. So, you know, that's my own opinion.
you looking for a motion to support your,
I think just having it back in council in terms of response back would be preferable from my point of view. Legally, I don't know what the appropriate next step would be, but I'm sure it's covered.
I don't believe it's actually a need right now to have anything official since we're not adopting any sort of procedural issue.
all right? Anything else on this issue? Thank you. While you're there, manager's discussion?
Oh, yeah,
Mike, just to revisit, do you have what you need to respond to him then?
yeah,
from us?
that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. So I wanted to provide a quick update on US 6 Phase 2. I talked about it, well, probably every council meeting since I've been the city manager. We have a meeting scheduled, I believe, next Tuesday, August 4th, with ODOT District 3 to discuss what will be conceptual design for the bridge and limited access connecting Jim Campbell directly to US 6 in that section, essentially somewhere between the high school and Farmwood Glen, those condos there. So we should have those design concepts, I'm hoping, through OHM's office by the end of the week. Get those out to ODOT so that they have time to review prior to our discussion, and hopefully what I assume to be some good feedback. And even dating back when we initially broached this subject prior to the newest regulations on the break of the LA, the feedback from ODOT was always positive. It was just that it was cost prohibitive from land and right-of-way acquisition. So obviously hopeful, and I think long-term this solves. This provides a better solution for the Jim Campbell Center Street US 6 intersection than ultimately trying to fix the way we were trying to fix it prior to. So that should be, I'll provide council with update on that. I wanted another.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Are you saying that this new concept would mean that Center Street does not have to be one way?
Correct. Yeah, I think the biggest modification, and this is all to be flushed out, obviously, a lot of discussion with both the community and council. I think the likely solution that we'll come back to is Jim Campbell's preferred methodology to getting on the 6 would be directly through the new intersection, and then we would try to eliminate its access to Center Street altogether. And the biggest hurdle right now is just making sure that we can provide easy access to both east and westbound on 6 from Jim Campbell. So. Relative to capital improvements, we talked a little bit about the Showboat parking lot. They actually started some of the site work today and should be paving and striping tomorrow. So good news there. Excited to see that one taken care of. On the Rye Beach storm project that was included within the budget, we did finalize design. I want to say just prior to our last council meeting, we were out to bid. Today was the bid opening. That was an initial engineer's estimate, $90,000 project. Well, bid came in at $68,900. So about $20,000 under budget there. We still have, we'll have a design inspection contract following. I would imagine somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000. Haven't seen the actual proposal yet. So all in, about a $75,000 project. We'll be back to council with all the specifics, budgetary impact, all those things. Haven't had a chance to flush out the numbers and just getting the bids out today, but at least encouraging. And I know the residents within the Rye Beach area have been working with us on this for a long time, so exciting news there. Working with both OHM and ECADEC to put together a narrative for through the CARES Act, there's an economic development grant created for public infrastructure that directly ties back to job creation and retention. I think I mentioned this in a previous management report, but the two projects we're targeting are Salmo Parkway and the Conard Utility Project. So we're working through, it's actually managed somewhat through ODOT, even though it's a federal program, and so they have a grant coordinator that we've had some dialogue with and received fairly strong feedback for both projects, and so we're working towards putting the narrative together, working with between ECADEC and Corey to get specific numbers to help spin or tell the narrative essentially and talk to the infrastructure's importance in terms of job creation and retention along the infrastructure there. So should be forthcoming. And then the last thing I did want to touch on just quickly, we were trying to have a first reading of the AMT agreement on tonight's agenda. Unfortunately, we did not receive that commentary from AMP, but that'll be still ongoing, and hopefully we'll have that for the next council agenda. And then I did just want to make the point too, I think I mentioned previously that I would like to also invite representatives from AMT to come to a council meeting somewhere along the legislative process, just to do one final sign off on it. So, any questions, anything specific? Yeah?
Hey Mike, I've heard a lot of commentary out in the public regarding Berlin Road, Laguna Drive, and some of the neighborhoods regarding fast driving. Is there anything you can do? And I know speed bumps, I think, have you go to, so you guys gonna comment on that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Never mind.
No, it's okay. You can do it now. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, because actually, that's part of what you worked on this week. So, Cliff Notes, Safety Committee meeting, there's a pretty heavy community participation on high-speed vehicles coming out of Laguna. And so it's gotten to a point where there is a resident on that street who is willing to buy his own radar sign. So after I reached out to them after the safety committee meeting, Mike did some more homework on that, and he actually has come up with a price for a portable radar speed sign. We used to have a trailer that's broken and not real user-friendly, I guess is the best way to put it. So do you want to take it from there then?
So as part of just to back up on the sign vendor real quick, part of the Route 6 project on the school zone signs in French County, we're installing their solar powered, essentially radar enabled remote control. So you can set the parameters, collects data, it essentially tells you average speed and all those things. And so that same company makes a portable sign that it's battery powered, it can be implemented essentially just commutable, so you catch any existing signposts. So rather, they're seeing cities start to use these and deploy these instead of the speed trailer, which is kind of a traditional methodology. So
And it collects data.
And it collects data, so it essentially does the function that they typically lay the tubes down to get traffic data. This actually does that for you, and it downloads it into a pre-formatted Excel spreadsheet, which is actually pretty cool too.
Take a picture?
Does not take pictures.
It doesn't do dishes either.
Well, no, like a picture
It's
and
all
send a
good.
picture.
No, it's actually here. It's incredibly cool. And
Yeah, well, I
pretty
mean,
affordable.
lived in Germany for 10 years, they don't, cops don't pull you over for speeding, they take a picture and send it
So,
to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
They do that in Florida places too.
Yeah.
So the nice thing, obviously, from the trailer perspective, this is, I think it's about $3,100 sign.
Then it can be moved around,
Basically moved around there.
once you,
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike and I chatted just briefly. I mean, to have a private citizen go to that expense, and we didn't even get to zoning. You know, I haven't even talked to Christine. Can he actually put that type of thing in his yard? I mean, we don't know.
well,
So,
we don't want to have control over it, right?
Yeah, ultimately, I don't think we should be outsourcing the safety.
right. Well, and there's other neighborhoods with the same complaints, so we
Right.
can move this thing around.
Yeah.
But having just one, and us being a larger community, is there a program that we might be able to have multiple of them throughout the community,
Yeah.
and then be able to collect more data and then take further action?
Yeah, and we actually started to work with OHM through the procurement side to see if there's maybe some safety dollars out there that would help offset some of the cost. Obviously, you can imagine once we have this once, every single neighborhood's going to want
And that's
one
what,
all over, so.
But if there is a program that we could set up, if somebody did want to for some private funds, maybe a neighborhood or something, why not look into those opportunities? I mean, me personally, I would buy one for my house because people do fly down my street. The last thing I want to see is my kid get peeled out.
Absolutely.
Because some kid's texting and driving or some adults.
Yeah.
So it's just another awareness to show the speed. And even 25 miles an hour, it's still fast in the
It
neighborhood.
is, I agree.
So,
Okay.
thanks for looking at this. You want to see this?
And I think so everybody knows that there's more discussion that has to be had by our legal counsel and in zoning for a citizen to actually do this in their yard. So, and I agree with Mike, we don't want to give that up on an ask our citizens to do that. I think that's our responsibility.
I mean, I think after that, the safety meeting they had with this information out there, I think it would do wonders to some of our emails and calls that we received.
And they did come back and ask for speed bumps, and that's where that conversation,
Right, so, I mean,
that's where you heard about speed bumps.
This, and again, too, I mean, this is really a temporary deployed at certain times of the year, whatever the case may be, but I think the battery span is about a week. And so there's something to keep in mind too. They do make solar powered options, and I think it close to doubles the cost, but it's something to at least look into. That could be a permanent solution as well. But at least just to know that this availability exists, I think is a good first step.
Well, if we're gonna get the equipment, and this is probably a safety committee thing, but is cameras off the table? If we looked at that previously, and that's proposed?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I think that's a legal issue.
Yeah, that would be a legal issue, and in light of some of the statutes that have passed and been overruled and whatever, so that's something that we'd have to look at from the legal side of things as to what would be required on that.
Officer Lausinger, what do you think of our cameras? We got thumbs down.
Okay. All right, let's, and I'd like to say that, I think the safety committee met very quickly on this issue, and I appreciate the concern from our citizens, and I appreciate the safety committee acting pretty quickly on that issue. Anything else, Mike?
Yeah, I wanted to address the nickel plate discussion as well relative to the property access and leases and everything. So we had received, actually I had received even back to July 4th weekend some correspondence regarding it. So back in 2018, we had John Hancock Associates survey just clean up a bunch of, just give us some property lines all over a bunch of different city parcels. Nickel plate was one of those ones that we just wanted to firm up what the city's lease was. And so they reviewed a bunch of historical documents, including our lease, deeds of record, all of those things. And I don't know if everyone has, Terry, if everyone has provided a copy of this.
Yeah.
So the area essentially that the emails had included was a legal description of a parcel that was purchased by the Nickel Plate Association back in 1995. So that area is actually highlighted, and one of the points within the legal description, it says essentially I think it's the eastern boundary that runs north, that property line, says it actually specifies it's about 380 feet north to the historical shoreline.
No, it's in
Current shoreline.
Yeah.
So the fact that it delineates specifically with what that is, and not to the shoreline, but it's actually a dedicated actual foot amount. That's what's highlighted within here. And then you can see they actually found the pin in the field, the half-inch iron rod is actually found right there. So what this document is showing is the city's current lease that I think was re-upped in 1995, if I remember correctly.
95 when they bought it.
So at the same time that Nickel Plate Association purchased the highlighted portion, the city also reaffirmed its lease with Norfolk Southern, the Nickel Plate Beach Association. I think, I grew up in the community. I think the long-standing belief was always that the ravine was kind of a natural property line. And the July 4th weekend specifically, the police department came to me because there had been signs that were posted all along the ravine that said no trespassing. And utilizing this information, it's pretty clear this is city property and under control. So I did have them remove the signs just because, again, obviously you can't regulate access to public property. I can't speak to the specifics of the police department's involvement of at least the allegations that the police department took action to remove anyone from the beach, but I would just reiterate the fact that it's a public park and it's a public beach. The police department's typical behavior is not to remove people from the beach, but to regulate behavior within public park, and that unless, laws were specifically being broken, then I can't imagine that was an action. I haven't had the chance to follow up that conversation with the police chief to get parameters or specifics of what may have taken place, but that at least be my off-the-cuff response. And there's another concern. Cleaning, and it is a legitimate discussion, and this was something we talked about internally too. is that ravine line is a demarcation between which side contains which portion of it. And so I understand the concern, and ultimately, I mean, I think it's a discussion for the council specifically in terms of the long-term footprint within the nickel plate facility. And if there is any discussion to either take that portion over from a maintenance perspective to actually maintain it, utilize it as a public beach, or if there is, it's a little difficult because we're technically a tenant. One of our initial thoughts was if the association really does like it and would like to have it, we could entertain a discussion for a sublease. I don't know that Norfolk Southern is going to be in the business of allowing us to sublease property that we're leasing from them. But we could at least, I mean, have ongoing conversations with the head of real estate for Norfolk Southern. That's a conversation and facilitation. I'd be happy to make if, again, there is interest from the residents within that area to talk about the creation of a private beach over there. So,
Just to reiterate on, so, and I get the issue because of everything that's happening, the beaches are super
slammed right now.
For years, that ravine was kind of a borderline,
Yeah.
and I get it. Just because I'm familiar with the breakwater. The breakwater actually did maintain it.
It did.
With a dozer every year.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
it was fine, it was, you know, that's fine. The city does lease that property. We've never said there was a private beach there, we know where our property
Right.
rights are.
Yeah.
If it continues to be that crowded, you know, the city takes care of the nickel plate part, that should be included.
Yep.
I mean, I understand that, and I understand your concerns on that.
Yep.
There's gonna be more people, there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a private beach.
Right.
But if we're gonna, if the public's gonna use it and we're maintaining the rest, we need to maintain all of it.
100%.
So,
So right now, the maintenance with beach cleaning equipment and everything stops at the ravine. Parks and Rec,
Yeah, that's my understanding.
the contract they have with A1.
I think we actually we both use A1. So in A1's, they're doing the city, or the nickel plate area, we call it east or west of the ravine. They actually do the other portion
Oh, so
as well.
They are paying A1
But they're
to
paying
do
A1 directly,
that
yeah.
section of beach
Yeah.
right now. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, and
So I mean, that's a legit concern.
It is.
Obviously, that's not appropriate. That shouldn't be happening. So.
So how do we change this?
I mean, that's probably something that, it's a city beach, the city needs to maintain it.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not-
As of right now, the way it's laid out, that's the city's beach, and we should be taking care of it.
So do we reach out, who will reach out to A1 and make that change?
Well, yeah, we'll do that internally.
Okay.
Yeah, Doug's on the phone with them every couple.
So I,
Follow up with the,
Yeah, and we'll also respond. Yeah.
you're gonna respond to Peggy?
Yeah, just to
Okay.
let them know where things are at currently.
Okay.
And again, I don't know the council's appetite in terms of if there is any discussion to open up the potential if there is interest for a private beach over there. I don't know.
She knew that the meeting was tonight, so she wasn't expecting to hear from anyone prior to tomorrow at the
Right.
earliest. And I did not, after, thank you, Terry, for mapping this out for us and making this so visible. I appreciate you doing that. So I've not shared this with her either.
Okay.
I guess before the discussion about subletting, you might want to, I guess, talk to
Norfolk.
Southern
Yeah.
to see if that's even an option.
Yeah.
But at this point, whenever they do the beach, they need to do the whole beach.
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to not think about concern, certainly not for the rest of this season. If we start maintaining it, we'll see
Yeah.
how things
Yeah, this
go.
is
gonna-
Next year,
Yeah.
This is the
the,
second year.
next year, the use of the beach without COVID might kind of dwindle back a little bit, and
Mhm.
naturally people might start staying, and then,
Yeah.
but I suppose at that point, we're still gonna have to maintain it.
Correct. Yeah, I don't, based on the timing of working with the railroad, I wouldn't anticipate we'd be able to pull anything off this year. I mean that with all due respect.
All right, anything else?
I mean, did you want to say something about the buoys?
Oh, I don't know the specifics on the buoys, to be honest with you. Actually, I'll fill out there if there is anything on expansion of swim, or not the swim lane, the boat lane this year and the geographical location of it?
What specifically are you looking for?
The question was the expansion of the boat lane past Old Homestead to actually then incorporate in front of the Breakwater Beach specifically. I don't know if that was part of this round or just because it's City Beach, is that the reason why it was included in this year's?
The layout that we have this year is the same that we had last year.
Okay.
It's approved by the Coast Guard, so we draw a map of where we are asking they get placed and then submit them, and that's how they get approved. So essentially, each year we can review it and move them. And I know I've had a discussion with some people about moving that mooring lane more to the east, which would essentially go into the Old Homestead 1 beach area, where that grass area is. And I mean, we essentially can recommend whatever we want out there,
Okay.
as long as, you know, the city would approve it, and then council, or when we submit it to the state, they would have to approve that.
So we didn't move the boat lane as a result of the survey on the nickel plate this year?
The mooring lane is in the same spot
Same
as
spot,
last
okay.
year, yes.
Thank you.
I think the concern, and also Monsignor knows where it's at, there's a grassy area that's just to the east, and it's a short beach area. Everybody's on this part of the beach, or everybody's on Old Homestead Beach. I think the issue that we're gonna run into, and I get it, is that it's a safer place for the boats to come in. There's not a lot of people that are laying right there, whatever. I think the issue that you're gonna run into is that grassy area is on Old Homestead property. So that would have to be okay, I guess, with them or not.
I mean, we've been working with the associations to kind of put buoys where they would like them,
Right.
but essentially out on the lake, we don't really need their permission, essentially. But we want to work with them because that's their area. And where the buoy or the mooring lanes are now is in an area where there are a lot of people on the beach and then essentially out in the lake.
Right.
So from my perspective during boat patrol, moving the mooring lane down more east in that grass area,
Yeah.
it really would be a better location.
And the people I spoke to, I think, passed that along, and I told them that I had spoke to you, and that was something that, it's not gonna get changed this year, but it's gonna be reviewed and looked at next year.
And it's not difficult to just
Right.
move them over, do a new map, new GPS coordinates, and submit that.
Perfect.
This fall, so it's ready for next year.
All right, that it? Okay, thank you. As far as I'm concerned, or my discussion, first of all, I'd like to say that the Route 6 repaving project has gone along very well. It's obviously, you can start to see the improvements with the curbing and those kind of things. I'd also like to thank our citizens. I know that this is causing some inconvenience, and I appreciate their cooperation and understanding and with that, and hopefully at the end of this process, it'll be well worth it. So I think they're doing a great job with that. That's all I have. For the good of the order, Mr. Hardy?
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor, but I would ask, and I'll do it after this, I'd like to make a motion for an executive session.
Okay.
Well, we'll go through it and I'll do it after.
Mr. Hayes?
Yeah, thank you. To reiterate what the mayor said, kudos to Mike, Doug, staff for the Route 6, really going really smooth. I did attend the chamber meeting this morning. You know, as probably all organizations, they're struggling with their fundraising activities because of COVID, but they're doing the best they can. There was also a discussion of Main Street Committee, which I think, in my view, meshes very well with the work we did with Ecadec in creating that Main Street corridor from Bogart all the way to the pier. And that was about it.
on July 21st. On top of the speed concerns on certain neighborhood roads, we also got an update that the ladders for the pier are in fabrication right now, so the ladder and life rings should be installed shortly, so that'll be a welcome addition out there. I think that's really all I guess, you know, we've talked about economic development here a couple different times. The plan that Abby was working on, where do we stand with that?
We've been working to acquire some, Michael have it pretty, going pretty quickly here, acquire some input from other businesses and realtors in the area. And then after that, we will be compiling all that information that we've gotten. And the council will be then going through a needs analysis to look at what we need to do to start planning and setting direction for the city based on the input from our folks, all these committees all these folks we have involved.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Not much, just thanks to staff, Mike, Doug, Corey, legal, just for keeping everything going and moving along here. We're a busy place here on top of COVID and everything else, so appreciate everybody's efforts.
Yeah, I don't have a lot, I think I've spoken up, and everybody's doing a great job, and keep moving forward.
I would like to say congratulations to Mobility Works Group. Those individuals started in the plaza. I remember when they first started, and now it's pretty interesting to see them grow, and they stay in Huron. So best of luck and congratulations. Thanks for working with them. That's it.
Okay. Mr. Hardy asked for an executive session.
A motion for an executive session for pending or imminent legal action regarding the taxpayer demand, Stacy Hardy. I'd like to ask that the acting city manager be included in the discussion.
Any discussion around the
Well,
motion?
yeah, we have to invite you.
Yes.
Okay, so we invite legal counsel. All right.
All right.
Tax votes, you were tax votes.
Any discussion on the motion? Please call the roll.
Hardy.
Yes.
Stady.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Taft. Ardino.
Yes.
Dyke.
Yes.
All right. All right, everybody ready? We are back in regular session at 8:06. And there's no other action to be taken, so a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Roll call, please.
Dyke,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Eddie.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Pacino.
Yes. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
And then